the Trump wing right now. There only is a Trump wing of the Republican Party. Um, if they win in November and win a lot of things in November, well, they're going to remain dominant, and then it's just a question of where those other Republicans are going to go. But if they lose, um, and um, then there might be an effort to reclaim the party by some of those old Republicans, or there. I think we might see um, a political configuration um, that would be in flux, where there would be a MAGA party, a center right Republican Party, and a Democratic Party. Although then probably the Democratic Party might itself show some divisions between uh, its left wing and its centrist wing. So again, historians are not particularly better at predicting the future than anyone else is, but um, I think that it is quite possible that we're going to see a period of instability in our party structure, and that might facilitate electoral college reform, uh, and the adoption of a system that is more justifiable and comprehensible.
Hmm. Th- That's a very interesting point. So you would say that there's a lot riding on this current 2024 election. There's a lot at stake here.
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, um, uh, yes. I mean, things even more urgent and pressing than electoral college reform. However close that's dear to my heart. But I do think that there's a great deal at stake, and that I think that claims that democracy itself, or American democracy itself, is somewhat at stake in this election are not overstated. I think that um, we either have, if democracy means that the people participate and decide, uh, who runs the government, and the people have the right. And what that also means is um, that the people have the right to peacefully throw a previous government out. I mean, that's that's really that's essential. And if the processes that yield that are not fair and are not open and are not transparent, and then if they also include intimidation and possibly violence, I think that is a significant deterioration of democracy, and I think that we could face that in various places.
So do you think Donald Trump is a threat to democracy?
I do, I do.
Looking to the future, if it doesn't happen this election, a lot of people are saying that this will be the last election. I don't buy into that, but do you think that it will happen in the future possibly? Do you think it's inevitable?
What is the it?
The threat to democracy, the end of American democracy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't buy into the notion that this will be the last election. I think that there's an awful lot of people out there who would be really enraged. I mean, um, I think that the political rights would be weakened not through some not by a declaration that there will be no more elections, but a gazillion different measures that will, uh, you know, that will make it more and more difficult for people to vote, or more and more people for people or parties to get on the ballot. I mean, there's a lot of small corrosive steps that will take place. As to whether the demise of American democracy is inevitable, I guess I have a two-part ambivalent answer to that, which comes in part out of I teach a course about the rise and fall of democracies globally.
Oh, wow. Oh, so you have a very firsthand insight to this sort of issue, huh?
Well, I don't. I'm not sure how insightful it is, but I have opinions.
Well, feel free to share them.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say two things. One is that um, I don't think there is anything, and I think that this has been a real change in thinking in the U.S. I don't think there's anything inevitable about the preservation of American democracy or democracy in any other particular country. Um, I don't think it's guaranteed to endure. I don't think democracies are guaranteed to endure any place. Okay, and I think that we could encounter various crises, domestic and international, that could turn the United States into a quite profoundly undemocratic country for a while. Um, the flip side to that is that when I look at the long history of democracies and political institutions, um, is that any government to remain in power for any long period of time, um, has to eventually get the consent of the people in one form or another, or the consent of a large proportion of the people. I mean, you can repress, you can scare the daylights, intimidate, and repress uh, people for a while. You know, and the while can be, could be a person's lifetime. I mean, it can be 50, 60 years, or more likely 20 or 30 years. But when you look at, at the history of other regimes, other countries, there's a burbling up of a desire for democracy. I mean, in fact, there was, at least at some point, there was some polling that was suggesting that people who lived in undemocratic regimes were much more pro democracy than people who actually lived in democracies. Uh, so there's a yearning for participation and for the freedoms that might accompany it. So I think that if American democracy falters, it won't be forever. And I don't know what that will look like, and I don't know what the resuscitation will look like. Um, that's my long answer to your question.
I think I agree with that sentiment. I mean, I don't think anything can last forever. I truly believe America's the greatest country in the world. I believe in America's greatness, but America, the way it is today, at least, it's impossible that that will last forever. Obviously, and to your point, I would agree with that. When I look back at history, it seems that even though democracy is not perfect, democracy seems to be the best form of government that human beings have been able to come up with. I as sort of a intellectually curious answer. I'm very intellectually curious with anarchism. What would you say about anarchism and their belief sort of in like no government as opposed to democracy? Do you think anarchism could ever work?
I mean, I had a period in my life when I was younger when I felt a certain allure to anarchism and anarchalism, and syndicalism. I mean, I was a great fan of the Wobblies, but no, I don't think it can work. And I think that part of the problem that we had, and maybe it may have looked this way at the end of the 19th century too, in the early 20th century, but um, I think that we have technologies, a technological basis to so much of our society that reinforces hierarchy. I think that our technologies reinforce hierarchy and concentrations of power in ways that would really make it very difficult to sustain a no government anarchist uh, system or world. I mean, I understand the lure and the attraction, but I don't think it's really feasible.
Yeah, it's a fun political ideology to think about just because it's so extreme. You know, if you've ever seen The Dark Knight, there's a line. My favorite line of the movie is the Joker. He says, "Some men just want to watch the world burn," and I think that's definitely anarchist. Have you ever heard of Michael Malice?
No.
Oh, he's kind of a political commentator. He's an anarchist. He goes on my favorite podcast, aside from my podcast, is the Lex Friedman podcast, and he goes on there a lot, and they kind of talk about all sorts of crazy things. But he's a funny, interesting fellow.
Well, then we return to the second part of what you said. I mean, I also think that that it's the iteration of the a reiteration of the famous Churchill line, but that I think that democracy you know has many flaws, but it's the best form of of government. I mean, in the end, I mean, part of where I come out on this is that um, the people have to have a right to change the government. And they have to have a system for doing so. And if you don't have a system for doing so by peaceable electoral means, then what you're left with is violence. And that's all that you're left with as a way of changing governments. And that doesn't seem like a great way to live.
Yeah, some people would argue that is the way to approach it. I 100% fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think that is the answer. Violence has been the answer in the past to certain evils, you know, for example, Hitler, but I don't think the that violence is the answer to change our American democracy. I truly believe in democracy. To leave off on a quote from one of possibly the best presidential speeches of all time, JFK was speaking about the Berlin Wall, and he said, "Democracy isn't perfect, but we've never had to build a wall to keep our people in." I think that's a fitting place to leave off on.